Hello.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Ludo.
Lydie.
How's the drive?
Oh, it took a long time. Border people.
Yeah, right.
Welcome to Cross Paths, the podcast of the UTMB World Series. Every month, two runners, one elite, and one amateur come together to discuss trail running and much more. They share their passions, inspirations, and get to know each other better. Today, French trail legend Ludovic Pommeret, winner of the UTMB in 2016 and the TDS in 2022, welcomes Lydie Raillard, a passionate runner from Chamonix, to his home. Together, they discuss their love of travel, nutrition, and the secrets to longevity in sports. We hope you'll enjoy this moment where their paths crossed.
Ludovic, let's get this podcast started. It's not every day you meet an ultra-trail legend, but I'm going to introduce you to all our listeners, even if I think they know your track record inside and out. So, Ludovic, you're 48 years old and you're a computer engineer working in air traffic control. You grew up in Valois, Savoie, and continued your studies in Grenoble. Until the age of 25, your sporting activities focused on board sports, snowboarding, windsurfing, skiing. You discovered trail running by chance in 2000 when your brothers-in-law coached you in a mountain race, and it was a revelation. You quickly, perhaps too quickly, committed yourself to long-distance running before rethinking your strategy. Your victory in the Grand Raid 73 in 2007 ahead of Douwer Schuppe was the first in a long series of performances. Third place in the CCC in 2009, a magnificent victory in the UTMB in 2016 after a comeback that made trail history. 3 second places in the Diagonale des Fous before a victory in 2001, hand-in-hand with Daniel Young, and then a victory at the TDS in 2022. You love the competition, the atmosphere of the races, and the friendship between runners. Defying the passages of time motivates you deeply. You are getting ready to celebrate the 20th anniversary of your first participation in the UTMB this year. So does this little summary apply to you? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, that's me. On the other hand, there's one part that's a bit missing for me, and that's my family, because I'm married, I have 2 daughters, so that also counts in the presentation.
It's important. And you have brought a personal object. Can you tell us what that little object in front of you is?
It's a small metal object with 2 parts and a rope. Can you guess what it is?
It doesn't speak to me at all.
It doesn't speak to you at all.
No, it looks like a little bell, but now that you've lifted it, it's not.
Oh, no, it's not a bell. It's called a plumb bob.
Okay.
It's used to check the plumbness of a wall, to see if it's straight, for example.
Okay.
Why a plumb bob? It's important to me because it's also a bit of life strategy. Together as a family, we built our second home, soon to become our main home. So that was a big part of our life. Not a sporting part at all, but a part where we devoted a lot of time to it. It was a family project. Our daughters helped in any way they could. We spent 6 years building this house. So it's a little nod to a tool that's useful in this case for construction. So there we have it.
Okay.
So, a little introduction. Lydie, you're 35 years old. You were born and raised in the Bordeaux region with your brother and sister, of whom you're the eldest. Very early on, you devoted yourself to swimming. You spent 18 years in a club, including 4 in sports classes. Although you didn't have the physique to be a powerful swimmer, you had excellent technique, which led you to become a swimming teacher. You hated running in your youth, but when you had to take a running test to qualify as a teacher, it was a revelation. With a friend, you start out on the road. What a mistake. Before taking to trails when you settled in Chamonix in 2018. In 2020, you have a near-death experience when you suffer a form of stroke. After a few months' convalescence, this accident acts as a form of liberation and motivates you to switch to long-distance running. You set up an Instagram account dedicated to running, where your passion for the sport and meeting new people takes precedence over the stopwatch. According to you, you can't stay still and devote most of your free time to sport. You take part in 8 to 10 races a year, with your sights set on 100K this year.
Yes, that's it.
Do you have anything to add about this?
No, this is pretty much it.
And you've also brought us an object. What is it then? It's I'd say it's a lens thing.
They're contact lenses, but not just any lenses. They're orthokeratology lenses.
Okay.
Well, the short story is that I'm nearsighted, and when I was on the OCC, I got some dust under my lens, and it scratched my cornea, because for 58 kilometers, it was just rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. I had to go to the emergency room afterwards. And I have an acquaintance who told me about orthokeratology lenses. In fact, they're night lenses that correct my myopia during the day. So now I just have to sleep with lenses at night to see clearly all day long.
I can't see how it works, but okay, it's magic.
Exactly. That's great. Ludovic, did you grow up in a sporting environment?
Sporting environment? Well, yes, I grew up in the mountains, so there's skiing. After that, I didn't come from a sporting family, if that's what you mean. My parents weren't particularly sporty, neither was my sister, so yes and no. An environment conducive to sport, in any case.
And did your parents need to encourage you in your practice?
No, not especially. Of course, when you live in the mountains and then in a resort, in fact, you end up skiing anyway. You also have to keep busy because these are villages. So hiking, no, it's a bit boring when you're young. I mean, a bit like running, I think. You said you discovered it late. It's a bit the same for me. I find it hard to get motivated to go running. It's not much fun. I don't know why we find it interesting afterwards.
That's true.
So, no, not pushed by my parents, but naturally we tried a bit of everything.
The environment was enough to get you into sports.
Yeah. What about you?
My family wasn't particularly sporty either. We used to go on a lot of hiking vacations in the mountains. That's the point.
Weren't those good times?
It was actually pretty fun. After that, my mother always insisted that we learn to swim, and my brother and sister and I really enjoyed learning to swim. We found out that there was a club, and it was really our decision to get into swimming. After that, they kept us active. I grew up in the country, so we were always brought up in the garden.
Quite different from those raised in the city.
Exactly. As we were saying in the introduction, you discovered trail running just before you turned 25, is that right?
Yeah, that's about the time. A bit of a coincidence, really. There was a race starting in Valois, and it was a bit of a challenge to do it.
And do you think you would have missed out on this discipline without this little stroke of luck?
Yeah, it's possible, because doing this race was a bit of a discovery. It was a bit of a curiosity to have an activity that started at the resort. So we thought, why not? It's a bit of an attraction then to say, but is it really possible to do 105 kilometers? There's a category for walkers. So I signed up and suffered as I discovered the discipline.
It's by making mistakes that we learn.
Yeah, it does, but it hurts too.
At the time, were there some particularly inspirational athletes in the discipline?
After that, when I became more interested in the discipline and tried to train a bit to meet those challenges, yes, there were some inspiring people at that time. We were talking earlier about Dawa Sherpa, Vincent Delebarre, people who were well known at the time, but there were others too. These people marked the beginnings of trail running, even if trail running was a bit vague. After all, running in the mountains has been around for years. So you too discovered your running skills late in life. What drew you to competition?
I would say it was to keep a goal and to stay motivated, because after a while running gets...
That's boring.
Especially when you start out on the road, it's fun, but it's boring. So it was really about having a goal. And my first race was with one of my best friends for the fight against breast cancer. It was a 5K run, and there was a very small climb in Montpellier, which I still remember. I said, they're crazy, they're running uphill, that's crazy. So I naively signed up for the Mont Blanc 10K, thinking it would be like a 10K road race, and then I got a phenomenal slap in the face. But in the end, it was great because I rediscovered the sport in a different way.
Okay, so it's the competition that motivates you to go and train.
That's what it is. It's really having a goal in mind.
We're a bit alike here. If I don't have a goal, it's hard for me to go and train, whereas I know friends who go and train, to have fun in training. So let's listen to a little sound extract that's sure to bring back a racing memory.
Okay, donc...
Maybe you can explain a little because you seem to remember well.
It was last April at the Paris Marathon. I came back on the road to help my friend with whom I'd started out on the road to go through the marathon. So I signed up for the Paris Marathon, and one of my best friends, who was dressed as a dinosaur on the side of the road, was cheering me on. And that day she proposed to me right in the middle of the marathon. Here's to girlfriends and encouragement.
Well, I couldn't have guessed, of course.
No.
Is that your best racing memory?
It's a very good memory of a race. When you have family and friends around, it's always incredible.
So how did you come up with the idea of creating an Instagram account? Well, I mean, a lot of people do, of course, but your account is a little bit different, maybe?
It's especially about running, about the mountains. It came to me because when I first arrived in Chamonix, it was difficult to make friends and meet new people, so it was a bit of a way to keep myself busy, to share what I was doing with those close to me, and then in the end, other people liked it. As I saw that it was working, I published more and more and more.
Okay, so you want to share the values of the mountains, but also of effort.
That's it. The effort and the fact that it's accessible to everyone, that we can all do it, that it doesn't matter if we walk uphill, that it's not reserved for the elite, and that we have the right to do it the way we like, and that even if we spend 5 hours doing what someone else does in 2 hours, it's not a problem. It's all about enjoying yourself and having fun. We don't care how others look at us. It doesn't matter. Go ahead, dare, go for it. That's really the message I want to get across.
3, 2, 1.
Ludovic, you're the opposite. Right from the start, you've shown an immense appetite for competition.
Yes, it's true that I did a lot of running when I first started. In fact, that's pretty much all I did. I didn't train a lot, but I ran almost every 2 weeks. Racing was a way of training or not training. I enjoyed going to the races. It was a way of moving around a bit, seeing the scenery and discovering races. So that's how I started until 2014. It took a while, though, and I did a lot of competitions.
And juggling a personal life and the life of an elite runner was complicated?
Yes, it was complicated. Let's just say my wife wasn't a runner. Well, she ran afterwards. She ran a little bit. So I have to say that she was more in charge of the house and the kids. In any case, having a full-time job and a family requires compromises you have to make on all sides, whether it's sport, family, or training. I don't know how many hours you put in a week, but you have to take into account your work and what's on the side in your training. I'm grateful to my wife for taking on more responsibility for the family back then, and now that the girls are grown up, we can do some things together.
It's good to share moments. You see things differently.
And it's memories for the girls too, because we took them to all the races. It's made them travel quite a bit. We try to take them with us every time. We've taken them to Réunion, Maurice and Japan several times, so they're family memories too.
It's awesome. It's cool. In the last episode of Crossed Paths, Dakota Jones talked about training like an engineer. Would you say that your profession has had any influence on your sports or mental training?
Non. Je dirais non.
So no, I'd say no. Well, maybe a little bit mentally, but when it comes to sport, no. I'm not really into analysing sessions at all. I have a cardio watch. Well, I use it a bit for training to check, but I've never really analysed my runs. I keep a notebook to get an idea of the volume I'm doing. So now with applications, you have them directly, but not analysed. And then I didn't really get into training. Now that I have a coach, he's in charge. He tells me what to do and I do it, or try to do it. And then, no, I'm an engineer at work, but not in my approach to trail running.
Non, je suis ingénieur dans le travail, mais pas dans mon approche en fait du trail.
Dans la pratique, ouais.
Non.
And how do you balance trail running and competition? Do you have to compromise in your life?
Des compromis, non.
Compromises, no, because I have actually built my life around what I like to do, which is being in the mountains. So I've made sure that my life is geared towards making sure that everything fits together. It's a very important part of my life. It's been a lifeline at a pretty difficult time in my life.
Not bad for a swimming teacher, eh?
Yes, it's very practical. But it's really been a lifeline for me that I've held on to, and it's a very important part of my life. After that, I'm learning to relax a bit and do some cross-training, but I've taken up cycling. And then when I was in Chamonix, skiing, ski touring. But it's true that sport is a very, very big part of my life, but it's not a compromise for me at all.
You have enough time to do whatever you want.
And the advantage of my job is that we work a bit out of step with people because we have to be open when people aren't working. That means I can have free mornings, free ends of the day, and the rest of the week, which is quite convenient.
Okay, and do you discipline yourself when it comes to eating? Before the recording, you told me about your breakfast, which was a bit professional.
What I didn't mention was that it was weighed because I'm seeing a nutritionist. Firstly, for me, because I'm someone who's very square in my life, so that's also part of the trick. And then to try to lighten up before my ultra at the end of August. And after that, I still have some deviations. I love chocolate. No kidding.
Okay, you find your balance a bit like that.
That's how I find my balance, you see? Are you rigorous in your preparation? From what I understand, maybe a little less so?
I'm very strict, so I didn't have any almond croissant this morning. So I'm very strict about what I eat. No, actually, I eat what's on offer at the restaurant at lunchtime. In other words, I eat everything. I try not to overindulge, although I do overindulge in chocolate, sweets, and sausages. Okay, I overdo it. So I don't have a nutritionist, although my nutrition partner and I do have a plan for the races, but not outside the races.
But that's important in racing, especially in ultra trail.
I had a lot of nutritional problems, especially at the beginning. I don't know how things went for you on the races, but I had a hard time finding my balance to not feel bad on the races. Has that solved anything for you?
No, I took on a nutritionist for that too, because not many people eat enough on the races, and so at the end of the race, your legs feel heavy. You feel like you're lacking carbohydrates and all that.
So it's a bit more for performance, whatever you're looking for.
Because I don't want to end up on my kneecaps either. I'm doing this for pleasure, not to end up in a state where I'm at the end of my tether.
It's true, you don't want to end up like that?
No.
Isn't that what you want to look for? If you increase the distances, isn't it also about looking for that kind of thing?
To see how far I can go.
Other sensations or resources that you may not feel able to go to.
But it's also because the coach told me I was a diesel engine. I run on economy. He told me that you can run for a very long time, and so I want to see how far I can run for a very long time.
Okay, so you have a nutritionist. I understand you also have a trainer.
Yes.
I don't know who's amateur and who's professional.
Okay.
But I think that given my longest distance is still a 60K race, I think I need to push the body a little to prepare it for an effort that's still going to be violent. Even if I'm going to take an indefinite time, I think Courtney will get there from the UTMB before I do from the CCC.
So this is CCC.
Yes, I'm attending the CCC, so I have to finish before noon. That's all that matters.
Okay, but you chose CCC because it's at home?
Because it's at home.
But what makes you choose one race over another in general?
I really like running at home because you're running in a pretty idyllic setting, and knowing the trails makes me feel better. After that, it's...
You're a bit of a square, so you don't want too many discoveries?
I do. Last January, for example, I was invited to take part in the Alula trail race in Saudi Arabia, and I was able to discover some incredible landscapes. It was a real eye-opener. It was an opportunity, and I heard a lot about the race.
For me, it's a bit like that. It's all about opportunities. I was in Argentina recently because I got an invitation, but I didn't know Argentina. Then there are preparation races that fit in with a goal, like this year's Hard Rock or the UTMB. I choose those races. It's not really a question of opportunity. The UTMB is for the 20th anniversary of my first participation in 2004. But other than that, I like to do these discovery races, like you were talking about in Saudi Arabia. It's about having a race that's a bit of a journey.
Are there any races you'd like to discover?
There are still plenty of countries I haven't visited. Some cultures attract me more than others, even if I'm more attracted by landscapes. I'm not really a city dweller at heart. I'm a bit less at ease in a big city.
Ludovic, it's hard to talk about racing without mentioning the UTMB, so I suggest we listen to your sound extract.
Managing to finish first, so I find myself in 50th place because I spent 3 hours folded in half, unable to walk up and down. There you go, I couldn't believe it. Top 10, I was thinking, that's good. And then to get to this. You can hear it less than in your sound extract, but there was also emotion.
A lot.
It was perhaps a little less externalized than in yours. It's a crazy memory in relation to this scenario. I also finished with one of my daughters.
It was a spectacular comeback.
Yes, this scenario multiplies the emotions you can have at the finish line, although you'll see soon enough. In fact, I think the more you go ultra, the more your emotions linked to fatigue are multiplied tenfold. And what's more, with all the twists and turns, you don't necessarily believe it when it happens.
8 years on, how do you look back on this race?
Of course, I think it's brought a certain visibility to the discipline. It's helped the development of trail running. It's helped the development of races. You can't take away what the UTMB has done for trail running. I think it makes a lot of people dream. It's still the most famous trail race. If you ask people all over the world what trail running is and if they know a race, I think there's a 90% chance it's the UTMB.
90% de chance pour que ce soit l'UTMB, donc voilà, ça reste un défi.
So it remains a challenge and a goal for many runners just starting out.
Including me?
But you in particular, because you live next door, so I think it's a bit like with the Réunionnais and the Diagonale des Fous, which everyone dreams of doing. We've talked about the UTMB. Apart from the marathon, that's a bit special for you in Paris.
Cette UTMB, pour toi, à part ce marathon, voilà, qui était un petit peu spécial à Paris, mais quelle est la course qui est...
What's your most accomplished race to date? Before this year's CCC.
Well, I'd say it was my OCC because it was the first time I'd ever done a semi-long distance race. It was long for me. It took me 12 hours, which is a long, long time, and I actually made it to the end. When I got to Argentière, I had to go back up to La Flégère, and I said I don't feel like it, but if I go left here...
We stay in the valley.
It goes faster.
No, that's the downside of knowing the place.
And the fact of having gone all the way and having managed to say to myself, I'll put my brain down and then I'll go, I'll climb, and I say to myself, I can actually do it. It was also a big trigger and a big accomplishment to say to myself, well, yeah, you've done it.
When was this?
It was in 2022.
You said you didn't feel like going up the last climb to La Flégère, but you're going back anyway. And what makes you enjoy it? What motivates you to go back and what pushes you to go for longer?
I think it's the pain of it.
So you're a bit of a masochist?
Yeah.
Is that what you want? Do you have to be?
When you love a sport, whatever the sport, you love the pain associated with each sport. For example, if I'm asked to go weight training, I say no because I hate the pain that comes with weight training, that muscle that heats up. On the other hand, the feeling you get when you're running, when you're trail running, the pain when you're climbing, in fact, I think, yeah, I like it, but I think it might be more or less the same for you.
So for me, there's the trail and then there's the ultra trail.
Yeah.
And it's true that the first time I actually took part in the Diagonale in 2009, there were times I thought, it's not possible.
What am I doing here?
What are we doing here? I find that there are emotions, and then you're going to find resources, like you were saying. But it's not possible to have so many variations, to be so bad at one moment and then at the end to be able to finish and be much better at others. Is that why you increase the distance? Do you want to find out more about this, or have you already discovered it on shorter distances?
Even on a 20-kilometer run, sometimes I think, what am I doing here? Yeah, I think it's to push myself a bit further and really see how far I can go. And mentally, too, it's about pushing the limits of the mind. And I think there's also all the dopamine you get at the finish. Even if, for example, I finish an OCC in 12 hours, you get cheered like you're Kylian Jornet. Wow.
It's true that it's always difficult to put into perspective what you're doing. It's a race you do for yourself, and in the end, it's a bit of a personal pleasure.
C'est un plaisir un peu personnel.
It's totally personal.
After the CCC, what's your next step, your dream race? Is it the UTMB, or are there other things, other races?
Yeah, the UTMB. I really discovered trail running in 2017 when I discovered Chamonix. I saw the start and I said, wow, I have to run this incredible race. The emotions brought tears to my eyes, and I said to myself, one day I'll have to line up for this race. That's why I had to do all this training too, because I don't have the aptitude. I don't run easily, and so I have to train maybe 2 or 3 times harder than the others to get 3 or 4 times less results. But in order to get through these time barriers and succeed.
Okay.
In 2018, you went through a saturation period of self-doubt and introspection about your source of motivation. And how did the fire come back?
It's true, I was wondering if I hadn't done all the races, if I really still wanted to continue running. We were talking about certain constraints in terms of work and family, and having completed a few races, in particular the UTMB, did I really want to continue? And that was a bit of research into why I was running. So there was a bit of discussion and exchange with a colleague at work who does a bit of mental preparation, and we talked about it. And yes, I've regained my motivation while still setting myself race and performance goals.
And has your source of satisfaction in racing changed over time?
Of course, I can't necessarily do the same races I used to because I still have a certain performance objective, as I was saying. So there are some races, they're still open, but I don't feel at all competitive on them.
There's no secret to longevity.
No, unfortunately, I haven't found it. After that, I'll change things up a bit. When you're on an ultra, you don't necessarily need the same abilities, and there may be other criteria that come into play, not just physical fitness. So yeah, that's about it. And on a more personal note, what are your activities? What do you do in your spare time?
I'm a trail runner.
So it's trail running and swimming lessons?
I do a lot of sports. I don't only do trail running, but I also spend a lot of time in the mountains because it's a way for me to recharge my batteries. I don't have very high social batteries, so it's a way of recharging my social batteries, being in the mountains and breathing fresh air. Cooking, I love cooking. Reading in the evening, I like reading. And then managing social networks, well, that's still a hobby, but it takes time to come up with ideas, to think about posting, to create montage. And what are your hobbies?
As
you were saying, training takes up a significant amount of time, apart from work and the time we spend with our families, so there's not a lot of leisure time. Our travels are also focusing on racing, so we like to travel. We took a family trip to South Africa once when it wasn't the Cape Town Ultra. We weren't there for a race, but I think that's the only exception.
After that, matching a race with a vacation is cool.
I don't read much, I don't go to the movies either. I watch a few TV series from time to time.
I understand that your goal is to be retired by the time you're 50. What would you like to do after that?
I'd like to travel and do sports. It's a goal we've set ourselves. It's also related to the object I presented earlier.
Yeah.
We built this house with the aim of returning more to the mountains, but it was with the aim of retiring a little earlier, actually. Retiring doesn't mean stopping everything. I don't intend to stop doing sport for the time being. I hope it can continue. Continue to travel and take a little more time for things we don't necessarily have time for. Maybe a little more time with my family. There are certain things I regret, things I could never get back, especially with my parents. But there's time I'd like to spend with the girls. Maybe that'll be possible. And then to do certain things where you don't take the time to do them properly, and it's always a bit on the fly, a bit less square, a bit more on compromise, where you do things not as well as you'd like to do them, so you have a bit more time, and sometimes to do nothing.
More time, yeah.
So now we have to answer questions that are drawn at random, and you have the chance to start.
Wow. Oh. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give to the child you were? That's a tough one. I'd say it would be to listen less to others, listen more to myself, focus more on my desires, and less on pleasing others and putting myself on the back burner. Because I've always been a bit of a people pleaser, and I've always listened less to what I wanted to do, and maybe start saying to myself, listen, if people criticize you, you don't care. Do what you want to do. And I probably would have started running earlier.
I'm hoping for an easier question. There are easy questions and difficult ones. So, what's your greatest quality and your worst flaw? Quality, I would say maybe... In fact, the mind. I have a hard time letting go. Is that a quality or a flaw? Maybe a bit of both.
It could be both.
Worst flaw. Maybe not expressing what I feel too much, especially to my family. If you ask my family that question, I think that might be it. Keeping things to myself.
Well, now that we know each other a little better, let's play a game. We're going to make some statements about ourselves. I'll tell you 3 questions about me, but only one of them is true, and you have to guess which one it is. The first one is when I was training in Montmartre a few days before the marathon. I was doing a live stream on Instagram, and I happened to run into Casquette Verte, who trains there a lot because it's the only place where you can climb, poor guy. So he was really nice, and we chatted for a few minutes, which my followers and I still remember. As you said in my presentation, I had a kind of a stroke. It's called cerebral thrombophlebitis. And so in the clinic where I was, there was a swimming pool where I was convalesced. As well as keeping in touch with a familiar environment, I had the opportunity to teach swimming to a 74-year-old lady who was in rehabilitation. And then the third, as you know, I run for fun, and I took part in the Disney half marathon dressed as Belle, the princess from Beauty and the Beast. What do you think?
They're all so possible. Come on. I mean, you met Alex at the Paris Marathon.
I did meet Alexandre, but it wasn't at the Paris Marathon. It was at the UTMB.
Okay, so which one was true?
It's the princess costume. I love running in disguises. Now it's my turn. While working on my house, I was almost crushed to death by a mechanical shovel. The job was far from finished. I would have been angry if I had given up along the way, but that's not my style. This is the first one. I took part in the Verbier Saint-Bernard in 2014. Very occasionally, I listened to music at the start. This happened this time. Distracted by the music in my headphones, I thought I heard the start signal and took off at high speed. After about 20 meters, I realized that I was the only one who had left. I made it back to the finish line to the applause of the other runners.
It was a nice, if slightly embarrassing moment.
If that's true, I understand.
On the 18th of February 1991, I still remember the date, a friend invited me to go to a concert in Geneva. It was an American rock band that I didn't know at the time and whose name happened to be Nirvana. They weren't very well known at the time. I managed to get drummer Dave Grohl to sign a copy of the CD. He's no Kurt Cobain, but hey, that was something. I've become a big fan since then, and I think it's a valuable item. So, which are true, which are false?
I'd say I'm hesitating between the first and the last.
Between Nirvana and the mechanical shovel?
I'd say the first one's true.
That's right. Mechanical shovel. Well done. A mechanical shovel accident that put me in a coma. And then I was lucky because the shovel overturned. I was under it and it didn't fall on me. Its tracks got stuck against the wall of the house and it stayed there.
Wow.
Until someone came to rescue me. You also experienced something that could have changed your life, but that's life experience.
That's it.
Anyway, congratulations, well done. So, Lydie 1, Ludo 0.
Well, Ludovic, it's time for the questions from the UTMB World Series community that we received on social networks. And we have a question from Antoine who asks, can you be a party goer and an athlete at the same time?
Antoine, what kind of a question is that? It depends on the time of year. Yeah, but when you're close to a goal, it's hard to be festive. It's like eating, at least sometimes, I think. Even if I say I don't pay much attention to my diet, it's like everything else. You can't go overboard. You can have exceptions, but they have to stay exceptions. I think ultra is something you think about a little bit every day.
We also have a question from Juliet. Do you have to work or could you be a full-time professional athlete?
I have to work. In any case, I didn't choose to become a professional because I was already married. I already had my daughters and it was getting complicated to concentrate on sport. Now I feel that my life is finished. We've done things that we don't necessarily need to do anymore. And now I feel that I can make a living out of it because I still get something out of it, but without the risk of injury. So I think it's possible to make a living in France. It all depends on what your goals are, whether you're single or not, and what level you're at.
And then we have a question from Susanna who asks, what do you do with all the trophies you've collected over the years?
Now we have fewer and fewer trophies. There are a few scattered around the house. There used to be quite a few cups, classic cups. I've got some in a box somewhere. And now I mostly keep the trophies that stand out. I even keep some of the special cups. Thank you, Susanna, for the question. Lydie, you've already told us about the CCC and your desire to take part in the UTMB. In the longer term, do you have any other ambitions, sporting or otherwise? A tour or something crazier?
Maybe an Ironman for a change. Stay in the ultra endurance, but always in this optic of...
Oh, I'm disappointed.
3.9 kilometer swim.
Oh, yes, that's it. Okay, that's interesting. I'm going to tell you about my experience, so you might change your mind. I did an Ironman, Ombraman, the same distance. I hated the swimming because I couldn't swim for a while, but that won't be a problem for you.
It's not the most difficult, no.
Just for the atmosphere, I'll stay on the trail anyway.
Yeah.
What I didn't like about being a runner in the peloton was the referees. The fact that you couldn't ride side by side on the bike, or that you couldn't chat. I've had some experience, but I think the atmosphere is still the same.
Yeah. I think you have to live it.
For the sporting objective, I think it's cool to do that. Well, you'll see. You'll make your own experience.
Yeah. You're getting ready to celebrate the 20th anniversary of your first participation in the UTMB. Do you have any other plans for this year? We talked about the Hard Rock.
Non, à part l'UTMB, c'est vrai que après l'UTMB, moi j'ai
After the
rien
UTMB,
fixé
I haven't made any
cette
plans
année.
for this year.
On va déjà voir
We'll
comment
see
se
how
passe
the
l'UTMB.
UTMB goes, and maybe it'll be more of a discovery race, a trip as a couple. No time targets, at least for me.
Pour le coup, sans objectif, en tout cas pour
Anyway,
Ouais.
I'm a competitor, so I annoy my wife when we do it together. Even on the diag, I pushed her a bit at the end of the race to keep her place, so it's probably a travelling race.
Course voyage, probablement.
Thank you very much for this exchange of views.
Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best, as we say here near Switzerland, for your goals. And maybe we'll meet in Chamonix.
Yeah, maybe in Chamonix.
There aren't many people there, so we should normally bump into each other.
Yes, but depending on what time I arrive, I may stay behind the line. Thanks anyways, lots of good things and a good UTMB above all.
It's on, and I'm going to try and be a bit more square with my diet and all that. I'll take my cue from you. That's a wrap.
And that's it for today. We hope you had a great time and that you're feeling inspired to go out for a run. If so, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and share this episode with your friends, colleagues, or trail partners. Subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. We'll see you next month for another encounter.
So you live in a celebrities neighborhood. Is that what you think trail stars are all about?
We see them often.
Especially in July, I guess you see all the people doing the reconnaissance.
Even with the Mont Blanc Marathon, there are plenty of people coming.